Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about living and working in Alberta.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah. Um, we've got this special guide from the Alberta government.
Oh, okay.
It's called the Opportunity Alberta Guide.
I see.
So Alberta is, a really great place to live.
Okay.
People in Alberta enjoy a good quality of life.
Mm.
And there are a lot of friendly towns and cities
Okay.
and lots of beautiful nature.
Right, right.
But also, Alberta has a really strong economy with many jobs.
Yeah.
And this is really good news for people who might want to start a business.
So it seems like Alberta's working hard to invite people to come live there.
Yeah.
Let's take a closer look then at what this guide has to say about life in Alberta.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Well, this guide tells us about Alberta's many different landscapes.
Mm.
So there are busy cities like Calgary with 1.3 million people and Edmonton with 1 million people.
Wow.
But there are also many wide open spaces.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that makes Alberta so special, right?
Yeah,
You can kind of live in a city and still be close to nature.
exactly.
It's the fourth biggest province in Canada, by area.
Right.
And it also has the fourth largest population.
Okay.
So that means there's space for everybody, but also you're never too far away from the wilderness.
Exactly. Exactly. And here's something that might be interesting for you, for our listeners.
Okay.
Life in Alberta is more affordable than in many other places in Canada.
Really?
Yeah, this guide tells us that families in Alberta usually make more money than families in other Canadian provinces. So,
It's less expensive to live in.
right. And so it's more affordable, even though they're earning more, it's more affordable.
Yeah, right.
The guide says that Alberta has free health care, help with energy costs,
Right.
and less expensive housing.
Wow.
And it even says that Alberta has the lowest taxes in Canada.
That's incredible.
That's great news for anyone looking to, save money.
Absolutely.
And if you love sunshine, well, Alberta is the sunniest place in all of Canada.
Wow. Okay, I'm sold.
Think about this. 1,900 hours of sunshine in the north and 2,300 hours in the south every year.
That sounds very appealing.
Right.
Yeah, especially for people coming from colder climates.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what about the culture in Alberta?
Okay.
The guide mentions that there are a lot of exciting festivals in Edmonton.
Yes.
They actually call Edmonton Canada's festival city
Wow.
because it has over 50 festivals every year.
That's a lot of festivals.
It is.
Yeah.
And it also mentions the world-famous Calgary Stampede, which of course celebrates Alberta's cowboy history.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's something for everyone in Alberta, from city festivals to rodeos.
Absolutely. And it's not just English-speaking communities either.
Oh, okay.
Alberta has a large and growing French-speaking population.
Right.
So this shows that Alberta really welcomes people from many different cultures.
It's inclusive.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So what if you don't want to move to Alberta right away? This guide also talks about just coming to Alberta for a shorter time.
Okay.
So you could come as a visitor.
Right.
The guide gives some information about visas. Or you could come to study.
Yeah.
Alberta has great schools and universities. And there's also the option of coming to work in Alberta for a short time.
Okay.
The guide tells us about the Temporary Foreign Worker Program.
Right. So this program lets people work in Alberta for a specific period of time.
Yes.
And the guide explains it in a really simple way, which is nice.
Yeah, they do.
So to work in this program, you need a job offer from a company in Alberta.
Right.
And you might also need a work permit
Okay.
or a special document called a labor market impact assessment.
Right. So here's something that I think is important for people who might want to work in this program.
Yeah.
Alberta actually has a special office to help temporary foreign workers.
That's nice.
It's called the Alberta Temporary Foreign Workers Advisory Office.
Okay.
And this office actually makes sure that all temporary foreign workers are treated fairly and work in safe conditions.
That's really good.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, what about making Alberta your permanent home?
Okay, yeah.
This guide tells us about a program called the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, or AAIP for short.
Okay.
And this is a special program that's just for Alberta. It's not the same as the immigration programs for all of Canada.
Right.
So it seems like Alberta's quite serious about inviting people to live there permanently.
Yes, and they make it very clear.
Yeah.
So this guide explains the different parts of the AAIP.
Okay.
For workers, there are different parts.
Okay.
One part is called the Alberta Opportunity Stream. And this is for people who already live and work in Alberta
Okay.
and have a job offer.
I see.
Then there's another part called the Alberta Express Entry Stream. And this is for people who are already in a program called Express Entry.
Okay.
Express Entry is a program for skilled workers who want to move to Canada.
Right.
But if you want to use the Alberta Express Entry Stream, you need to have strong ties to Alberta.
Okay.
Or you need to have skills that Alberta needs.
I see.
There's even a special program for people who work in the technology industry. It's called the Accelerated Tech Pathway.
So this shows that Alberta's really looking for people with technology skills.
Absolutely. They mention that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And for people who want to live in a smaller town, there's the Rural Renewal Stream. This is for people who have a job offer in a small town in Alberta.
Okay.
The guide also talks about what they call entrepreneur streams, which are for people who want to start a business.
Right, right.
We're going to talk about those more a little later.
Okay.
But it's important to remember that these are not the only ways to move to Alberta.
Okay.
There are other programs for all of Canada, like Express Entry. There are also special programs called pilot programs, like the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot and the Agri-Food Pilot. And there's a program called Family Sponsorship.
Right.
And this allows families in Canada to bring their family members to live in Canada.
Okay.
So this guide really gives a lot of options for different situations.
Yeah, it seems very thorough.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really important that this guide says is that you don't need to hire someone to help you with your immigration application.
That's really important to say.
Yeah.
Because, some people might try to, trick you and take your money.
Right.
So the guide says to be sure to use official websites and be really careful of fake websites.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that people who want to move to Alberta are safe.
It's really good that they point that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about jobs in Alberta.
Okay.
Well, this guide starts off by telling us something really interesting.
Okay.
Alberta has some of the highest salaries in Canada. That'll definitely get people's attention.
I think so.
Yeah. And they also tell us about some places that can help people find jobs.
Okay.
So there are Alberta support centers, which offer help with finding a job. And there's a website called Alice,
Okay.
which has information about jobs in Alberta.
That's nice.
Yeah. They also say that you can get help from organizations that help immigrants.
Right.
These organizations can help you find a job
Okay.
and, kind of learn about life in Alberta.
That's good.
Yeah. And they also say it's important to, meet people and make connections to find a job.
Right. To network.
Yeah, to network.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there are actually special programs in Edmonton and Calgary that can help you meet people in your profession.
Now that's neat.
Yeah.
What are they called?
They're called mentorship programs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So now we need to talk about something that's maybe a little bit more complicated. Credentials and qualifications. So this guide says that if you have a diploma or certificate from another country,
Right.
you might need to have it assessed.
I see.
This means someone will check to see if your diploma or certificate is kind of the same as a Canadian one.
Right.
So this is important for anyone who went to school or worked in another country.
It helps Alberta kind of understand your qualifications.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And for regulated occupations like doctors and engineers.
Yeah.
The guide says that you need to be recognized by a special organization in Alberta.
Okay.
So you should contact this organization before you come to Canada.
Right. So there are no surprises.
Yeah, to learn about the process.
Right.
It's important to be prepared.
Yeah.
The guide also talks about what are called trade certifications.
Okay.
And it says that if you want to work in a trade in Alberta,
Right.
you need a certification that Alberta recognizes. And they say that you can think about an apprenticeship
Right.
or a trades qualifier program if your certification isn't recognized.
That's good.
Yeah.
So they give you ways to still work in that trade, even if you don't have the right certification yet.
Exactly. Now let's talk about starting a business in Alberta.
Okay.
The guide seems to really encourage this. They talk about how Alberta has many entrepreneurs and a really supportive environment for starting a business.
Okay.
And they mention some financial advantages, like the lowest corporate tax in Canada and no provincial sales tax.
Wow. That sounds like a really good place to start a business.
It does.
Yeah.
And, like we mentioned earlier, there are special parts of the AAIP just for entrepreneurs.
Right.
Yeah.
But they also mention some resources that can actually help your business succeed.
Yeah.
So there are special programs for small businesses.
Right?
There's also an organization called Business Link, which offers coaching and workshops. And there's Community Futures Alberta, which helps people start businesses in small towns.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's great that Alberta helps people find jobs and start businesses.
It seems like they're really trying to, build a strong and diverse economy.
Yes, it really seems that way.
Yeah.
Okay, now this part of the guide talks about the practical things you need to do to live in Alberta.
Hmm.
So this part is about, helping new people understand the everyday things they need to do to live in Alberta.
Okay.
So they start by telling us about something that I think is really helpful. There are services that can help you before you even arrive in Alberta.
Oh, wow.
And these services are offered by the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta.
Nice.
So, having information and resources even before you arrive can make moving to Alberta much easier.
Absolutely.
So then they talk about the basics,
Okay.
and they start with housing.
Okay.
They explain the difference between renting and buying a home. They tell us about things like security deposits.
Okay.
They even mention working with realtors.
Right.
So this can be helpful for people who are not familiar with buying a home in Alberta.
It is. Yeah, it gives them sort of the lay of the land.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very practical information that can help new people feel less worried.
Yeah.
So then the guide talks about transportation.
Mm.
It tells us about public transportation,
Okay.
like buses and trains.
Right.
But it also talks about traveling long distances, like by bus or train or plane.
Mm-hmm.
And it explains how to get a driver's license in Alberta.
Okay.
Alberta has a special program for new drivers.
Right.
It's called the Graduated Driver's License Program.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like a step-by-step guide to kind of setting up your life in Alberta.
Exactly. And now let's talk about healthcare.
Okay.
Healthcare is really important when you're moving to a new place.
Yeah.
So this guide explains the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan,
Okay.
or AHCIP.
Okay.
And this plan actually gives free basic health insurance to people who live in Alberta, even if they're only living there for a short time. But it's important to remember that this insurance doesn't cover visitors or tourists.
Right.
So if you're just visiting Alberta, you'll need to buy your own health insurance.
Right. So if you're just going for vacation or something.
Exactly, yeah. The guide also explains how to get healthcare services in Alberta. And it suggests that you might want to buy private health insurance for things that AHCIP doesn't cover.
Okay.
And it even mentions that many companies offer health insurance as part of their benefits package.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. Now, the guide also talks about something that's important for many new people, improving English language skills.
Right.
So it tells us about different resources that can help, like language programs offered by the government.
Okay.
These programs are often free or very cheap.
That's good.
It also talks about something called the Canadian Language Benchmarks, or CLB. And this is a way to kind of measure how well you speak English in Canada. So, this can help you understand what level of English you need for different things, like living in Alberta, working, or studying.
Right.
Yeah.
And for people who might need help to pay for language classes,
Yeah.
the guide says to talk to their school
Okay.
or an Alberta support center, because they might be able to help with things like childcare, transportation, or even money to help with living expenses.
That's great. Alberta really wants to help new people succeed.
Absolutely. It seems that way.
Okay.
Now let's talk about education.
All right.
Starting with school for children.
Okay.
So the guide explains that school is free for children between 5 and 19 years old, and children have to go to school between 6 and 16 years old in Canada.
Okay.
But it also says that parents can choose to send their children to kindergarten.
Right. Yeah.
So this is a good option for families who want their children to start learning early.
Okay.
Then the guide talks about education after high school and education for adults. It tells us about all the different options in Alberta.
Okay.
So there are universities, colleges, polytechnic institutes, private vocational schools, apprenticeship training programs, and adult education programs.
Wow.
So there are a lot of choices for different interests and careers.
They really do cover everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, the guide talks about childcare, which is very important for families with young children.
Absolutely.
It tells us about different types of childcare, like daycare centers, family day homes, and preschool programs.
Okay.
So it gives a good overview of the childcare options that are available in Alberta.
Right.
It also says that if you can't afford childcare, the government might be able to help you pay for it.
Okay.
And it talks about resources for children with special needs.
Okay.
So, for example, there's a program called the Family Support for Children with Disabilities program.
Right. So they really want to make sure that all families have the support they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a good place to end part 1 of our Look at the Opportunity Alberta guide.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot of things,
We have.
like the different lifestyles in Alberta, the cost of living, how to come to Alberta for a short or long time, how to find a job, how to start a business, and even the practical things you need to do to live in Alberta.
Right.
This guide is really helpful for anyone thinking about moving to Alberta.
It is. It's very thorough.
It is.
And it's clear that Alberta is, trying hard to invite new people.
Absolutely.
And help them succeed.
Yeah. We'll continue our discussion in part 2.
Okay.
And we'll talk more about some of the programs and resources in this guide.
All right. Sounds good.
Make sure to join us then.
I will. Welcome back to our discussion about the Opportunity Alberta Guide. We're going to continue talking about some of the things we discussed in part 1.
Yeah, last time we were talking about the importance of having your education and work experience from other countries assessed.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
This guide gives a link to a website called the International Qualifications Assessment Service, IQAS.
Okay.
And IQAS assesses your education from other countries.
Right.
And this is important if you want to go to school or work in a job that needs specific qualifications in Alberta.
Right. It kind of helps Alberta understand your qualifications.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And for regulated occupations, like doctors and engineers.
Yeah.
This guide says to contact the organization that manages your profession before you come to Canada.
Oh, okay.
Why is this so important?
Well, I guess it's important to do that so there are no surprises.
Right.
And you don't have to wait a long time.
Right.
Each profession has its own rules and processes.
Right.
And it's best to understand those before you come to Canada.
Exactly.
The guide also encourages people to check if Alberta recognizes their trade certifications.
Right. And it even suggests that people look at apprenticeships or the trades qualifier program if their credentials aren't recognized. So these are good ways to become qualified in a trade in Alberta.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now let's talk more about the temporary foreign worker program.
Okay.
We talked about it a little bit before.
Right.
But the guide mentions a document called a Labor Market Impact Assessment, LMIA.
Yeah. What is that?
So an LMIA is basically a document that shows that a company in Canada needs to hire someone from another country for a specific job. And it also shows that there's no Canadian who can do that job.
Okay.
So it's a way to make sure that Canadians have the first chance to get jobs in Canada.
Right. It protects Canadian jobs.
Exactly.
And the guide also reminds us that there's a special office in Alberta called the Alberta Temporary Foreign Workers Advisory Office.
Yes.
And this office is there to help temporary foreign workers and their employers understand their rights and responsibilities.
Right. So it's a really helpful resource for anyone working in this program.
Yeah.
You make sure that people are working in safe and fair conditions.
It sounds like it. Now, let's go back to talking about permanent residency.
Yeah.
We talked about the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, or AAIP.
Right.
This is a special program just for Alberta.
Yes.
How is it different from the programs for all of Canada, like Express Entry?
So the AAIP is designed to help Alberta's economy grow. And it has different streams for specific industries and areas of the province.
Okay.
One stream that might be interesting for you is the Accelerated Tech Pathway. And this is for people who work in technology or have a job offer from a tech company in Alberta.
Right. So this shows again that Alberta's really looking for people who work in technology.
Yes, they emphasize that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And for people who want to start a business,
Yeah.
the AAIP has streams for entrepreneurs.
Right. We talked about these a little bit earlier.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
These entrepreneur streams help people who want to start or invest in a business in Alberta.
Okay.
And there are different streams for different levels of experience and types of businesses.
Right. And remember, there are other ways to immigrate to Canada besides the AAIP.
Yes, of course.
The guide mentions Express Entry, which is a program for skilled workers.
Right.
And if you have the right skills and experience, you can apply for permanent residency through Express Entry.
Right.
There are also pilot programs like the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot and the Agri-Food Pilot.
Yes.
These programs are for specific areas of Canada or specific industries that need more workers.
Right.
It's great that there are so many options for different situations.
Absolutely.
And for people who have family already living in Canada, there's the Family Sponsorship Program.
Right.
This program lets Canadians and permanent residents sponsor certain family members to come to Canada.
Right. And this helps families stay together.
Yeah.
And it gives people with family in Canada a way to become permanent residents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I want to mention something important that the guide talks about. It says that you don't need to hire someone to help you with your immigration application.
That's really important.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
the immigration process can be confusing,
Right.
and you might think you need help,
Yeah.
but this guide says that you can find all the information you need for free.
That's great.
Yeah.
It also warns about scams
Yes.
and says to use official websites.
Absolutely.
So they really want to protect people from being tricked.
Yes, they do.
Now, let's talk about some of the practical things you need to know about living in Alberta.
Okay.
The guide talks a lot about everyday details, starting with housing.
Okay.
It explains the difference between renting and buying a home and gives tips on working with realtors.
Right. And finding a place to live can be hard in a new place.
Yeah,
So this information can make it easier.
it can. It can take some of the stress away.
Yeah, exactly.
The guide also talks about transportation, which is important for getting around in your new home.
Of course.
It talks about public transportation, like buses and trains. It also mentions long-distance travel, like buses, trains, and planes.
And they even tell us that Alberta has 2 international airports.
Oh, okay.
One in Edmonton and one in Calgary.
Right.
So this makes it easy to travel to other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And even if you don't plan to buy a car,
Yeah.
the guide suggests getting a driver's license in Alberta because it could be used as identification.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having ID is important.
Absolutely.
A driver's license can be used for that.
Yeah.
The guide also explains the Graduated Driver's License, GDL program.
Right?
This is a special program for new drivers that helps them learn how to drive safely.
Right. It's all about making sure that the drivers in Alberta are safe.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about healthcare.
Okay.
We talked about the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan, or AHCIP, earlier.
Right.
This plan gives free basic health insurance.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that it doesn't cover everything.
Right. The guide says that you might want to buy private health insurance for things that AHCIP doesn't cover,
Right.
like dental care or eye care. And a lot of companies offer health insurance as part of their benefits, so that's something to ask about when you're looking for a job.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It also gives information on how to get healthcare services in Alberta. It mentions walk-in clinics,
Right.
which are good for when you're sick, but it's not an emergency.
Yeah.
And it talks about family doctors
Yeah.
who can take care of your health over a long time.
And if there's an emergency, the guide says to call 911.
Yes, of course.
It also mentions mental health services.
Yes.
And these services are important for your overall health.
It's great that this guide talks about mental health
Yeah,
and gives information about where to get help.
it is.
It's a reminder that you're not alone and there are people and resources to help you.
Absolutely.
It also talks about programs that can help families with low incomes, like the Alberta Adult Health Benefit and the Alberta Child Health Benefit.
Right. So these programs make sure that everyone can get the health care they need,
Yes.
even if they don't have a lot of money.
That's really good.
Now let's talk about language skills.
Okay.
These skills are important for making friends and finding a job in Alberta.
Yeah.
The guide talks about how important it is to speak English well,
Right.
and it lists different resources for improving your English.
It talks about language programs offered by the government, which are usually free or cheap.
Yep.
And it mentions organizations that help immigrants.
Right?
And those organizations often offer help with learning English.
It also talks about the Canadian Language Benchmarks, or CLB,
Yes.
and this is a way to measure how well someone speaks English in Canada.
Right.
And you need different levels of CLB for different things, like living in Alberta, working, or going to school. So the CLB can help you understand how well you speak English
Right.
and what level you need to reach your goals.
Okay.
And for people who might need help paying for English classes, the guide suggests contacting their school or an Alberta support center. They might be able to help with childcare, transportation, or even money to help with living expenses.
So this makes it easier for everyone to learn English.
It does.
And it shows how much Alberta wants to help newcomers.
Yeah, it does.
Now, let's talk about education.
Okay.
We'll start with elementary and high school.
Okay.
The guide says that school is free for children between 5 and 19 years old,
Right.
and children must go to school between 6 and 16 years old in Canada.
So this is an important part of the Canadian education system.
It is.
It makes sure that all children can get a good education.
Yes.
And parents can choose to send their children to kindergarten,
Right.
which helps them get ready for school.
Okay.
Then the guide talks about education after high school and for adults. It tells us about all the many different choices in Alberta.
Right. There are universities, colleges, polytechnic institutes, private vocational schools, apprenticeship training programs, and adult education programs.
So Alberta really has a lot of options for different interests and careers.
They do.
Whether you want to get a degree, learn a trade, or improve your skills, there's a program for you.
Yeah.
And for people who need help choosing a program, the guide mentions Alberta Advanced Education.
Okay.
And this organization gives information and support to people who want to continue their education.
So it can help you find the right program for you?
It can.
That's good.
Now, let's talk about childcare.
Okay.
This is really important for families with young children.
Absolutely.
The guide explains the different childcare options in Alberta.
Oh.
There are daycare centers, family day homes, after-school programs, and preschool programs.
Right. So it's good to have different options for different needs and costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for families who need help paying for childcare, the guide mentions government subsidies.
Right, and these subsidies help families with lower incomes pay for childcare.
Yeah.
And for children with special needs, the guide mentions the Family Support for Children with Disabilities program, FSCD.
Right.
And this program gives support and money to families with children with disabilities.
It's great that the guide talks about the needs of all families,
Yeah.
including families with special needs.
It is. It's very inclusive.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk more about some of the practical things you need to do to live in Alberta.
Okay.
Let's start with setting up your finances.
Okay.
The guide says it's important to open a bank account.
Of course.
This is important for managing your money and paying for things in Canada.
Right.
It also gives information about banks in Canada and how to choose a bank.
So this is a really important first step for anyone new to Canada.
Absolutely.
The guide also recommends getting a social insurance number, SIN, and this is a special number you need to work in Canada.
Right.
You need a SIN to get a job, pay taxes, and get government benefits.
Okay.
It's like an identification number for work and government things.
I see.
The guide also says that newcomers should learn about taxes in Canada.
Right, because taxes are an important part of living in any country.
Absolutely.
It's important to understand how taxes work in Canada.
Yeah.
The guide gives basic information about income tax, sales tax, and property tax.
Right.
And it gives links to websites with more information about taxes.
Okay, that's helpful.
It's important to be informed
Yes.
and pay your taxes.
Absolutely.
The guide also mentions the importance of making a budget and being careful with your money.
Right.
It gives tips on how to make a budget, track your spending, and save money.
Okay.
These are good skills for everyone,
They are.
especially for people who are new to Canada.
And these tips can help you be successful with your money in Alberta.
Right, yeah.
Now, let's talk more about transportation.
Okay.
We talked before about getting a driver's license in Alberta, even if you don't want to buy a car.
Right.
Because a driver's license is a good form of identification.
It is.
The guide explains how to exchange a driver's license from another province or country for an Alberta license.
Okay.
And it tells us about the Graduated Driver's License GDL program,
Right.
which is for new drivers.
Yeah.
This program helps make sure that everyone driving in Alberta is safe.
Absolutely.
And if you do want to buy a car,
Yeah.
the guide gives information on how to buy, insure, and register a car in Alberta.
Right. It's important to understand the steps and how much it costs.
Exactly.
So you are protected legally and financially.
And for people who prefer to use public transportation,
Yeah.
the guide gives links to websites for specific cities, like Edmonton Transit and Calgary Transit.
Okay.
So you can use these websites to learn about the different transportation options and plan how to get around the city.
That's good. That's helpful.
Now let's talk more about healthcare.
Great.
We talked about AHCIP earlier,
Right.
but I want to mention what the guide says about finding a doctor.
Yeah, finding a doctor is important so you can get regular medical care.
Yes.
The guide gives a link to a website that helps you find doctors who are taking new patients.
Okay.
And this is very helpful for people who are new to Alberta.
So this makes it easier to find a doctor
Yeah.
and get the care you need. It does. And if you need to see a doctor right away, call 911 for an ambulance.
Right.
It's important to know who to call in a medical emergency.
It is.
And for people who are having problems with their mental health,
Yeah.
the guide gives information about where to get help. It mentions mental health clinics and hotlines.
Okay.
So it's a reminder that you are not alone and there are people and resources to help you.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about finding a place to live.
Okay.
The guide talks about the basic things you need to know about renting and buying a home in Alberta.
Right.
And it gives links to websites where you can find places to live.
Finding a place to live in a new city can be really hard.
It can be.
So these websites can make it easier.
Yeah, for sure.
It also explains the legal things about renting,
Okay.
like rental agreements and security deposits. This helps new people understand their rights and responsibilities as tenants.
And for people who want to buy a home, the guide gives information about mortgages, property taxes and working with real estate agents.
Right, because buying a home is a big decision.
It is.
And it's complicated.
Yeah.
So the guide helps people understand the steps involved.
Okay.
Now let's talk about something that's important but people often forget about.
Yeah.
It's about making friends and feeling like you belong in your new community.
Right.
The guide encourages newcomers to get involved in their community and meet new people.
So this is a great way to learn about your new home and make friends.
It is.
It suggests joining community groups, going to local events,
Yeah.
and volunteering.
Right.
These are all good ways to get involved and meet people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for people who feel lost or overwhelmed,
Yeah.
the guide gives links to organizations that help immigrants.
Okay.
And these organizations offer many services and support for newcomers.
Right. So they can help you adjust to your new life in Alberta. They can help with things like learning English, finding a job, and even finding social activities.
That's wonderful.
So they are a really helpful resource for people who are new to Alberta.
Yes, they sound like it.
Yeah.
And one last piece of advice from the guide is to be patient with yourself. You know, moving to a new country is a big change.
It is.
It takes time to adjust, learn new things, and build a new life.
It does.
So it's important to be kind to yourself and give yourself time to adjust.
Absolutely.
That's a good place to end part 2 of our discussion about the Opportunity Alberta Guide.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot of important things about moving to and living in Alberta,
We have.
like finding a job,
Yeah.
finding a place to live,
Right.
getting health care, and making friends.
Yeah.
And it's clear that Alberta is working hard to attract newcomers and help them succeed.
It does seem that way.
And this guide gives a lot of information and resources to make moving to Alberta easier.
It does. It's very thorough. In part 3, we'll talk about some of the cultural things about living in Alberta.
Okay, that sounds good.
And we'll share some final thoughts on what this guide is trying to tell us.
Okay,
Be
good.
sure to join us then.
Welcome back to our final discussion about the Opportunity Alberta Guide.
Yeah.
In this last part, we're going to talk about kind of the culture of Alberta.
Okay.
You know, it's not just about practical things.
Right.
It's also about the experiences and way of life that make Alberta special.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've talked about, you know, the jobs and the help you can get in Alberta.
Yeah.
But Alberta is also a province with a lot of culture and beautiful nature.
It is, yeah.
So the guide talks about Alberta's different landscapes, you know, from busy cities to large natural areas. And it mentions that Alberta actually has 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites
Wow.
and 5 national parks.
That's impressive.
It is. And it also has over 450 provincial parks and protected areas.
Wow. So it really is a great place for people who love nature.
It is, yeah.
If you like hiking, biking, fishing, canoeing, or just being in nature, Alberta has something for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who like city life, well, the guide says that Alberta has a lot of cultural events. They say that Edmonton is called Canada's festival city
Oh, right.
because it has over 50 festivals every year.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a lot of festivals.
it is.
You
And of
know.
course, we can't forget the Calgary Stampede.
Of course not.
This is a very famous event that celebrates Alberta's cowboy history, you know, with rodeos, exhibitions, and live music.
It's a big tourist attraction.
It is. People come from all over the world to go to the Calgary Stampede.
That's true, yeah.
So the guide also says that Alberta has a really strong sense of community.
Hmm.
You know, the neighborhoods are friendly and welcoming to people from different backgrounds.
Right, it's a place where everyone can feel at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the guide also mentions Alberta's French-speaking communities.
Oh.
So this shows that Alberta is, you know, a multicultural province that welcomes people from different cultures.
It's a good reminder that, Alberta celebrates different cultures and languages.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something that's important for newcomers.
Okay.
You know, adapting to a new culture can be hard.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to move to a new place with different customs and ways of life.
That's a big adjustment.
It is. And the guide talks about these challenges and gives some advice.
Okay.
So it encourages new people to be open-minded and curious about their new home. And it suggests, asking questions and learning from new experiences.
Right, it's all about trying new things.
Exactly, yeah.
And enjoying the adventure of living in a new place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the guide also says that it's important to respect the customs and traditions of Alberta. And it encourages learning about Alberta's history and culture.
So, it shows that you appreciate your new home.
Yeah.
And it helps you connect with other people.
Right. And for people who feel homesick or maybe have trouble adjusting,
Yeah.
the guide says it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of resources to help new people adjust to life in Alberta, like organizations that help immigrants, community groups, and mental health services.
Right. It's important to remember that, moving to a new place is a journey.
Yeah.
There will be good times and bad times.
Right, exactly. So as we're finishing up talking about the Opportunity Alberta Guide, let's just review some of the important things we've learned.
Okay.
So first of all, it's clear that Alberta has a strong economy and wants to invite new people to live there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The guide explains different ways to come to Alberta for a short time or a long time.
Right.
And it gives a lot of information on finding a job, starting a business, and getting important services.
So it seems like Alberta knows that it needs skilled and talented people from all over the world.
Yes, absolutely. And besides those practical things, the guide shows that Alberta is a great place to live.
It does.
It has a high quality of life, beautiful nature, and lots of cultural events.
Yeah.
And it talks about the importance of community, inclusivity, and trying new things.
So the guide's really saying that Alberta isn't just a place to work.
Right.
It's a place to, make a life, meet new people, and feel like you belong.
Exactly.
So that's really the main message of the Opportunity Alberta Guide.
Yeah.
It's inviting you to discover the opportunities and experiences in Alberta and to think about making Alberta your new home.
It encourages you to be a part of the Alberta community and help it grow.
Right.
So we encourage you to read the Opportunity Alberta Guide for yourself.
Yeah.
You can find a link to the official website in the description below.
And there you can read the full guide and learn more about the things that interest you.
Exactly.
It's a very helpful resource with a lot of practical information, advice, and stories.
It can really help you decide if you want to move to Alberta.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's all for this episode.
Okay.
We hope you enjoyed learning about the Opportunity Alberta Guide.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of things, but there's even more to discover about Alberta.
There is.
If you're thinking about moving to Canada, we really suggest you learn more about Alberta.
Yeah.
Alberta has many opportunities, beautiful nature, and welcoming communities.
We're sure you'll find a place for yourself here.
Thank you for listening to our show.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We encourage you to subscribe to our show and tell your friends about it.
And please check out the links to the resources we talked about in this episode.
Yeah, you can find links to our social media and those resources in the description below.
Yeah.
We chose these resources really carefully to give you the best information.
You did.
So thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Yeah, it's been fun.
We'll see you next time. Have a great day.